first day inspired me to a whole new vision of how we can democratize the field of astronomy. There are so many things that are proprietary. So a few years ago, the people that fund astronomy, they decided they were going to democratize astronomy. And what they decided to do is tell people who generate data that is funded by the public to release that data for free. So let me ask you, if I gave you some free data, what would you do with it? Half of the people that are trained have no idea what to do with the data from a particular astronomical instrument. And so what happens is that we've gone from an era of proprietary data to an era of proprietary knowledge. It's not just the information that you have, it's also how the information is presented. So the question is how do we aggregate information, make it readily available to everybody and anybody in the world, and present it in such a way that is accessible to anyone in the world if they speak that language. And that's what I hope to do. Instantaneously after leaving TED, the ball is going to get rolling.
I heard a statistic this morning about India's just gone through its baby boom. They have to educate 550 million people for the global workforce in the next 10 years, and just awed by that, and thinking of all the tools I've heard here that would help that outcome come about.
So openness is this beautiful concept that they've introduced, right? About how do we actually learn to live with one another and work with one another, share with one another, and connect in a more meaningful way. And I think all the flavors of that, the scary parts, the earnest parts, the joyous parts, have been developed, and so I don't know, my mind's kind of blown.
I'm behind something called cultural intelligence in terms of figuring out how to get people to work together much better with diverse groups of people. Instead of just focusing on your own intelligence or how well you empathize with other people, is figuring out how to work across borders, across cultures, across boundaries much better.
Well, I think the talks on openness were really interesting, the two sides in contrast. From openness, opening up governments, to openness in terms of opening up genomes and having people sort of construct viruses to specific person's DNA is it's incredible, from both spectrums. How that could be used on a positive realm for cancer research and having solutions designed specifically for you as an individual, and on the same way as threats, essentially individualized to the person.
How to design spaces keeping sound in mind, and why are we sitting on horns in countries like India and Africa entire time? The purpose of the horn goes away. And yeah, this was a TEDU talk, so this was a speaker on SoundWorks.
I caught a bit of it, but I didn't get to sit right in front of it. I actually thought about that when I went into the bathrooms and how loud the hand dryer was.
Exactly.
And how sort of uncomfortable it made me feel.
Yeah.
One of the ones that really stuck in my mind was the one about the paper microscope. That was true innovation and something that can make a difference in resource-constrained environments like Africa, and can make a big difference to healthcare.
My favorite talk so far was on how to build trust with strangers. And she gave wonderful examples, like great startups who are enable you to create trust with other people you don't know, like Airbnb or TaskRabbit. So, and I like her concept from social networking to service networking, because I think this is the future. This is the future of the web, and the technology can enable us create some certain level of trust between people we don't know in order to get things done in a very sufficient and easy way for us.
I was really inspired by Jane McGonigal's talk. That whole session that was to do with how you can kind of use quite simple techniques and ways of overcoming some of the negativities of the modern age, and sort of sharing those ideas, I found really powerful. And I loved that even though it was really awful that we had a power cut in the middle of her talk, when she came back on and sort of dealt with that, it was totally brilliant, and so you could see all the positivity in that. So yeah.
So my favorite TED Talk at TedGlobal2012 was the one where the co-founder of Arduino tells us how he has managed to release an open source product for others to use. And since I'm an engineer myself, I've tinkered around with the product myself, and I think it's a great opportunity for the engineers out there. And even in my country, Pakistan, has a lot of engineers, and I think it's a brilliant opportunity for them to explore the technology side of the product.
I think that the thing I'm getting away from it is this notion of a big picture and how all these things are connected, even though they don't, we all have our own fields, but there's always like a point of contact somewhere. So it's like this notion of you come to a conference that is about so many different things, but you go away with the big picture.
In the midst of graphically capturing the ideas worth spreading at TedGlobal2012, we ended up fully embracing the overall theme of radical openness by interviewing and picking the brains of various TED attendees. Evan, Tricia, and I spent a few hours during the week asking some attendees which talks they enjoyed the most and what kinds of ideas they might have percolating in their heads as a result of hearing all the talks. The following are highlights from our interviews.
All right, so
collective next.
So what do you like? What do you love? Or what are you thinking about based on what you've seen? Go ahead, Yashraj.
It's a brain spark. Like Jason Silva said, it's idea sex. In fact, it's actually making you want to do something just like them. Because I'm not a fellow like this guy is. But you really want to keep a standard or a certain set example saying, no, if I do something, it's going to be like this. Or I'm going to do something that will inspire a lot of people. So it's an inspirational platform.
All right, man. I'm thinking about how TED in the first day inspired me to a whole new vision of how we can democratize the field of astronomy. There are so many things that are proprietary. So a few years ago, the people that fund astronomy, they decided they were going to democratize astronomy. And what they decided to do is tell people who generate data that is funded by the public to release that data for free. So let me ask you, if I gave you some free data, what would you do with it? Half of the people that are trained have no idea what to do with the data from a particular astronomical instrument. And so what happened is that we've gone from an era of proprietary data to an era of proprietary knowledge. It's not just the information that you have, it's also how the information is presented. So the question is how do we aggregate information, make it readily available to everybody and anybody in the world, and present it in such a way that is accessible to anyone in the world if they speak that language. And that's what I hope to do. Instantaneously after leaving TED, the ball is going to get rolling.